Hello and welcome to the Wheel of Crime podcast, a podcast that's ran by two ladies who play games, mumble profanities, and laugh way too often. Also, this podcast does cover topics of sensitive nature, and as such, listener discretion is advised.
I'd like to add that we also have no idea what we're talking about ever, as part of the disclaimer.
Never. We never know what we're talking about. Ever. Zero research. Nothing. Just talking. Fill in the space. Air.
Brain, all air, no thought.
Air flow through my ear, out my mouth. That's how that happens.
Hello, my name is Jen, and welcome back to the Wheel of Crime podcast.
And my name is Emily. I won't lie to you, I think I had a stroke trying to read our disclaimer because my brain, jumped to this part of the show where we introduce ourselves, and I was gonna be like, hi there, my name is Emily. And then I was like, wait. I've made a mistake.
God,
Stop. Go back.
What am I doing?
What am I doing? But yes, welcome back to another week. Time has indeed passed. Once again. Obladi, oblada, life goes on. Ah.
We were pre-recording this episode, by the way, because when we usually record on Sundays, it will be Mother's Day. So we've made the executive choice to be with our mothers instead of here barely speaking to each other with one brain cell.
Basically, that is the goal. But is there anything that we should share with our listeners that we know fresh and new compared to our last episode?
I mean, I was gonna ask, what are your plans for Mother's Day, Em?
Well, sorry,
Cat Mageddon over there.
She is a menace. She looks at the green bar moving on the audio recording, and she's like, I need to touch it, but it's fine. Apparently she tried to run multiple tracks at once, and the program was like, nah, bitch. So we're fine. But as for my plans for Mother's Day, my mom really, really loves doing a sushi dinner, a fancy little sushi dinner. So I'm gonna take her out, and we're gonna do just a nice little sushi dinner, and maybe I don't know, maybe I'll do something else. I haven't decided yet, but she's been talking about it for a month now because she really looks forward to it every year. So I know that'll be one thing I do for sure.
Aw, that's sweet.
Yeah, super sweet. What about yourself?
Well, I'm gonna travel all the way back to our hometown from where I live in southern Alberta. Yep. Long journey. On the dusty trail.
Yeah, you're gonna take your horse to the Old Town Road and you're gonna ride till you can't no more?
Basically. Essentially. But yeah,
Makes
I don't
sense
know.
For,
we don't really have any
literal redneck capital, so
truly. We don't really have any concrete plans. I think the plan is I'm going to drive to our hometown from Calgary, and I'm going to... There's a really great place here in the city called Pie Junkies, and they make these little mini cupcake size pies that are you can get either sweet or savory, but I've only had the sweet ones because savory ones are basically all meat ones.
Yep.
But I'm going to bring her some of those because she likes pie and she's never tried them. So I think it'll be a hit.
You should bring me a sweet pie and see me
Okay,
also.
I'll send you the flavors
for a visit.
And you can tell me which one you want.
Well, I hope you have time to see me. I don't know if you will, but if you are able to catch me on your drift in and drift out of town, maybe we can do something together.
Well, maybe I'll stop in before I see my mom and drop off you and your mom a pie.
We are so lucky. I'm excited.
I know.
You're like Santa Claus, but with pies. You're Jill Will, the pie fairy.
Oh my god, Jill Will. That's gonna haunt me.
Jill Will, the pie fairy. I love it. This is your legacy.
Yeah. And then I think usually we go to like a greenhouse or something on Mother's Day and pick my mom out some
That's a good
flowers
idea.
for the holiday. So we'll probably do that, have some pies, vibe in the yard. You know, we usually sit out on the patio if it's nice enough. So that's the plan, I think.
That sounds like a good plan to me, and that's a really good point about the greenhouses. I always forget that they have like a special Mother's Day sale, so I should probably try and drag her to one of those things too.
Yeah, my mom loves plants. I love plants. It's a win-win, really.
I know. I'm in the same boat. I need to find more plants that cats can eat and not die from. So maybe a greenhouse is a good place to go.
It's true. My boy is allergic to all pollinated things, so he usually suffers a little bit on Mother's Day, but that's okay.
Yeah,
that's his problem.
That is the sacrifice on having to be born. So he can deal with that.
Exactly. He used to tell me that spring was his favorite season, but he's like allergic to the whole season, so I don't know why.
Also, with where we live, we don't really have a spring, so I think he's just a liar.
I think so.
I think he probably likes the summer because we don't actually get spring. We get snow, melts away with one hot day, wind, lots of wind, snows again, everything dead, no green, warm
then
again.
Then all of a sudden, all the green and it's summer.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it's summer, and you have grass, and that's it. No flowers, only grass.
You go buy flowers and pretend like they grew there naturally.
That is basically it. Yep, and you're like, wow, if I lived anywhere else, I could have flowers and my outside right now, but I don't, so I'll have them on my inside because it's still snowing outside.
Heckin' cold. It's hailing for some reason.
That's the other thing, too, is we don't really have a rainy season. It's a haily season. It's
Truly.
like not, instead of snow, you just get sky shrapnel. And no rain. And then it'll melt eventually.
A little bit of rain. You know. Just enough to flood all of Calgary. And then it's gone.
Yep. Calgary, everywhere between there and Edmonton. It all gets flooded. And then the grass is here. Hallelujah.
And then it's winter again.
And then it's winter again. Yep, I love that for us. I wish I could have a couple words with my ancestors, but I feel like if I was ever in that situation, I would probably have other words first, but you never know. But I do criticize their decisions almost every day.
I mean, fair enough. That's why I plan to move out of this hellscape of a province.
Well, you're taking me with you, so I'm looking forward to it.
Good.
All right. Well, are you ready for our wheel of questions?
I am.
I'm gonna edit out that hostage.
I'm editing out that readjustment, but Emily just did like a fucking backflip on her bed to get comfortable again.
I did. I sprained my ankle like a month ago. Wait a minute. Did I tell you how I sprained my ankle?
You did.
Did I mention it on the podcast at all?
I don't think you did.
Oh my gosh, Kate. So I was at an event that had beverages consumed, and I competitively danced to Rah Rah Rasputin against my sister and went full down into a, like, Russian can split situation. Then I tried to piggyback somebody who was like twice my size, and then I fell down the stairs at my building and woke up the next day with a massively sprained ankle, and it's still a problem. So, it's not comfortable. I'll say that much, but I am still alive, so there's that. Do I have regrets? A couple.
Many.
Would I do the same thing again? Maybe.
You're thinking about it.
I'm thinking about it. It was fun, but not loving the loss of mobility, but I'm assuming that probably also comes just with age, unfortunately. So, on that note, let's spin our wheel of questions. So, what would you do if, like, you were, say, like, at work, or you were just, like, traveling somewhere, and you saw somebody in public, and you met them, and they look exactly like you. Like, you stand beside them, same height, same hair, same eyes, same smile. Like, would you point it out? Like, what would you do?
I don't know. I think I would be weirded out, but I'm not. I'm like a very introverted person, so I probably would say nothing but be severely weirded out and probably like just run away.
Okay, okay.
I'd be like, I gotta get out of here. It's not
You're like,
safe.
something's fishy. I gotta leave.
Literally.
See, I honestly thought about it, and I don't think that my brain would even recognize that they looked like me until somebody else said something first.
Probably, yeah.
Because, like, I've had times where, like, say I've, like, dyed my hair and then walked past a mirror and then gotten spooked at, like, who just walked past the mirror. I don't honestly think I would know. Like, I would have no clue. I'd just be like, oh my gosh, like, I liked that person's shirt. And then whoever I was with would be like, that person literally looked exactly like you. No cap. And I'd be like, what? And that would be it. Then that would be the exchange.
And you'd be like, well, that's weird. Moving on.
Yep.
Let's go get sushi.
Yeah, I'd be like, problem for another day. For now, I am hungry.
Breadsticks. Thank you. Let's go.
Right? Exactly. So, all right. With that one, let's spin for our next question. So, why do you think there are so many people in the world who look similar that aren't related? Because I feel like even for, say, myself, like, especially with things like reopening and whatever, I'll have times where I'm, like, say, in, like, just, like, a public space where there's lots of people, and I'll think I see somebody I know, but it just ends up being somebody who looks, like, weirdly similar to somebody that I know. But then I, like, think about it, and it's almost like there's, like, different, like, genres of people who all just kind of, like, have very, like, similar facial... They either have very similar faces or very similar builds. Like, why do you think that is?
I don't know. That's an interesting question, because I think we almost see what we want in people. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, when I first moved to BC, I kept thinking that I, like, saw people I knew, even though I moved to a city where I didn't know anyone. And so, like, I kept being like, oh my god, like, it's that person. And I was like, no, it's, like, very, very unlikely that it's that random person that I knew in elementary school, you know?
Oh, yeah.
But, like, I think it's just, like, our brains are trying to, like, put, like, a name to the face or, like, trying to recognize someone. And it almost, like, tricks us into thinking we do.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about the whole, like, looking for patterns. Because, yeah, I mean, if you've met so many people and they have, like, certain distinct features about them, if you ever see that on somebody else, like, that would be a pattern that you'd associate with that person.
Literally.
That's a good point. I never even thought about that. See, my whole thing when I wrote this on why I think there's so many people who look similar is that kind of on some level, I think that as far as, like, variation goes between humans, that there probably can only be so much. And that anything that's, like, an extreme, like, say, somebody who has, like, really big eyes or, like, thin lips, like, there are going to be lots of people who are also like that. So it is kind of almost like a genre, I guess, or just, like, a certain, like, a certain feature type, right? And there's so many people in the world that, yeah, you would have lots of repetitions that come up like that. I think can only be so much variation.
I would agree with that. I think that, like, you know, there's certain features and, you know, that come from different people and show up in others, and you're bound to have someone who looks like you out in there in the world, because there's a lot of fucking people in the world.
That's the thing. And I think it would be, the only way you could have, like, more distinct variation, I think, would be if, like, there were more anomalies, like people will say with, like, a third eye or, like, multiple limbs, you know, like 4 arms or something. Like, if there was possibilities like that, we could probably have more variation, but we don't. It's very, like, cookie cutter mostly.
Yeah, but even if you had that variation as, like, an option, I think that there would still be lots of people who look like you because there would be other factors involved.
Yep. Oh, totally,
you know,
yeah.
Like, you just have the same eyes or the same eyebrows or the same nose or same face shape or body type, you know?
Yeah, no. That totally makes sense to me, too. Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's move on to our last. Yeah. Let's move on to our last question. All right, so how do you feel about like twins or triplets or quadruplets in general? Like when you meet somebody and then you meet somebody who looks just like them and they're like, oh my gosh, I have a twin sister. Or you meet somebody and they're like, yeah, like triplets run in my family. What is your opinion on that kind of stuff? Like, do you think that's super interesting? Do you think it's a little creepy? What do you think about that?
My first thought, I think, goes back to what we were talking about on our episode for last week, where as a person who has the potential to get pregnant, that's terrifying. I don't want that. No, thank you.
Yeah. Noted. Agreed.
But like, I remember when I was a kid, I always thought like having a twin would be so cool. And I always feel like the twins in like high school and middle school, they were either like really popular or they were like the weird people.
That would be true. I feel like that's kind of just most people in general. You're either one or the other, or you're like sporty or something. But yeah, no, I could see that.
But like, I feel like twins are not that common. So like in school, there's only ever like one, maybe two set of twins. Mm-hmm. And like there was like a spectrum of like, they were either like in with like the really popular kids, or they were like grouped in with like the kids who were quote unquote weird.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, no. I from what I can remember about everybody known who's a twin, like that would check out actually. Yeah. I'm trying to think about like what I can remember. See, I remember when I was like a little kid, I was really good friends with a couple of girls who were twins. And I just remember like one of my earliest memories being how much people would assume that they had in common with each other, like interests, or they both like thinking that they both liked all the same things because they were also identical twins. But their personalities were just so different, and like even like what they were interested in, like the one girl was like really quiet and she was into more like nerdy things, like she liked to read, she liked to play video games, like she just had more of like those types of interests, whereas the other one was very extroverted and loved being around people and like loved to do art and like all these other things, and like the other one didn't. And it was just interesting to like kind of grow up and like they would always dress the same and have their hair cut the same but still be so vastly different, and then people would just always assume that they were the same because they were siblings and they looked alike.
I think a lot of that is projected onto them by their parents, though. You know, the like same haircut, same clothes thing. Because I think parents of twins can kind of get caught up in like putting them in matching things, or they both have names that start with R, or you know what I mean?
I know. And so that was another thing too that I always felt weird about growing up, is like, I feel like for that type of thing, and this probably comes from being friends with somebody who, like people who were twins growing up, it really messed with their sense of identity, like to a pretty like large degree. Because I even remember that the one, she went through like a time period where like she didn't even want to tell anybody that she had a sibling at all, because then it would come up into this conversation of like having a twin and all these things. And she said that as soon as people knew that she had an identical twin, like it just completely erased her sense of like identity. Then suddenly it wasn't that just she was like this one person who looks the way she does and has her interests. All of a sudden it was like you and your identical sister. And then there's also like weird things that come up when you're older too, where there's like a bunch of like fetishes like around people who are twins, where people are like, oh yeah, well like you could have like a threesome with twins and it would be like having sex with the same person. Like I've had somebody tell me that before about how they felt about like those types of situations. And it's like your sense of identity becomes optional rather than just a requirement of being a person, which I always thought was interesting.
Yeah, I feel like people look at you as like one half of a whole thing when you're a twin.
Exactly. Which I totally understand why that would mess with a person, especially like in your brain and how you see yourself, right? Because then it would almost be like you wouldn't feel like, because you're seen as not being whole unless you have your partner or like your twin accomplice, then it's like without them, what are you? Right?
Yeah.
So I thought that part was really interesting too.
I feel like that would suck.
Yeah. Well, and even with like triplets, like I have never known any triplets growing up, but I like remember in our church there was a lady there who had triplets, and there was like another one that had like I think quadruplets or something, but like multiples who are all twins and stuff like that, and it's definitely interesting just seeing how that all turns out.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that would be really hard as a parent to take care of that many children at once. And I think that would be hard to be a child. And like I feel like as like I'm sure you can attest to being an older sibling, like you already kind of like have to share your parents' love once more siblings are introduced, right?
Oh,
But I
yeah.
think like being a twin, it's like that immediate like you're both fresh babies and you're already like splitting that down the half of like what one person can give because you know, like a parent only has so much to give of themselves,
Oh,
like
totally, yeah.
physically and
So,
emotionally.
oh yeah, well, physically, emotionally, like with their time, like with what they can do. Like I get that everybody, like in order to like make a child, there has to be, two people involved usually. Not always anymore, thanks to science. But like even with having, say, like double parents and having, two fresh babies, like it's still a lot of work.
Yeah. I I would never want to be in that situation personally.
Well, I mean, unless you have it running in your family, it seems highly unlikely that you will have multiple children because it has to be either that you run it runs in your family, or any kind of fertility medication or fertility treatments also increase the possibility of having more than one child. But those are the only things that cause it.
Well, I don't have any twins in my family that I know of, so I think I'm safe. Also, I'm not really planning on having children, so I think I'm extra safe.
You're like double safe then. It'd be funny though if like say you this is how you find out, oh yeah, twins actually do run in our family. It's just one of them always dies or like goes missing, and then you would be like, oh no, more things to worry about.
Hopefully not.
Right? But that is all of my questions. So, well, what do you think? Like, what do you think my topic for you is today?
You're for sure going to talk about clones. Or twins who eat each other in the womb.
You are actually pretty close. So, here is my description for you, okay? So,
Okay.
a doppelganger, or which is a German word and it literally means double walker, is a biologically unrelated lookalike or a double of a living person. In fiction and mythology, a doppelganger is often portrayed as a ghostly or paranormal phenomenon and is usually seen as a harbinger of bad luck, or harbinger of bad luck. Other traditions and stories equate a doppelganger to an evil twin. And in modern times, the term twin stranger is occasionally used, and the word doppelganger is more often used in a more general, neutral sense, and in slang is used to describe somebody who physically resembles another person. So I kind of have already talked about this particular topic before in relation to a particular story that I covered, and this one is so. This is one of those topics where I did a bit of a deeper dive into it, and there's actually like more like folds to it than I originally realized. So what I have for you today is like a few different like more widely known stories, and it kind of includes a brief synopsis of the one I covered previously. And then I wanted to include like individual stories that people have of meeting doppelgangers. But for that one, I needed to do a deep dive into Reddit, and it's a very niche thing, but there's lots of stories about it, so that's kind of something that I wouldn't mind covering in the future. But today, I'm going to give you kind of like a little bit more of an overview of some of these other stories that I didn't tell you about.
Ooh, well, I'm looking forward to it, Em.
Yeah, well, and like for our listeners, when I covered this previously, I believe it was like in the earlier part of the of our story series as well, so a little different with compared to how we do things now. But yeah, it's still got some fresh info in there. So if you already listened to that one, I hope you'll stick around and enjoy this one too, because it's like an updated version.
I see. All right. Well, I think you should take her away, Em. I'm looking forward to it.
Amazing. So, doppelgangers versus bilocation. So, bilocation is a body double. And it is considered a paranormal phenomenon, and it typically is seen as a manifestation of a person into another way. So, a doppelganger is supposed to be a shadow self that is thought to accompany every single person. And traditionally, it is said that only the owner of a doppelganger can see the phantom self, and that's why it is considered a harbinger of death. So if you were to see somebody who looked like you and nobody else could see them, that would be a doppelganger, and that would be considered an omen of death. And
oh, spooky.
Right? And sometimes a person's friends or family can see the doppelganger, but they're usually people who would be considered to be closer to you. So, like, if, like, you and I were somewhere and we saw a doppelganger of you, like, a stranger who doesn't know you might not have seen them if it was a doppelganger.
Right.
And whereas bilocation is considered a psychic ability to project an image of yourself into a second location. So this is considered to be a version of the body double and is known as a wraith in, like, some cultures. Obviously, other ones consider a wraith to be something else. But in this situation, it is indistinguishable from the real person and can interact with others exactly how the real person would. So...
Weird.
Yes, so doppelganger
So like a shapeshifter type thing.
Almost, yeah, except for it's like, it's considered to be more of like a psychic thing rather than like an actual physical thing. But it can still interact with people and pretend to be you while at the same time not being you. Which is why they consider it to be more of like kind of like a ghostly phenomena type thing.
Interesting.
Right? Also spooky. So,
super spooky.
Right? And that's something I never really addressed previously, is that I never even really knew that bilocation was a real thing. But yeah, it's considered to be something totally separate from doppelgangers while simultaneously still being, you know, more or less similar in a lot of ways. But in the stories that I'm going to tell you, there is a couple of them where it kind of talks a little bit about what they thought they saw was a doppelganger. But in some of these, it's more similar to bilocation.
Okay.
Ancient Egyptians and Norse mythology both contain references to body doubles, just as examples. So, but doppelgangers as a phenomenon, and kind of what I already discussed as being often associated with bad omens, they first became popular in the mid-19th century as a part of a general surge in the US and Europe in interest of the paranormal. So, kind of like what I was saying before, it's had its times through histories where it's been more popular, but they can find signs in literature of doppelgangers, or at least the concept of it, all the way back into ancient Egypt and Norse mythology, which I also thought was really interesting and didn't know. So, with that, I'll give you the first story that I got here, which is one of a lady named Emily Seiji, which I believe is how you pronounce her name. It's French. So, one of the fascinating reports of a doppelganger comes from the American writer Robert Dale Owen, who recounts the tale of a 32-year-old French woman named Emily Seiji. She was a teacher at Pensionnat von Nieuwelk, an exclusive girls' school near Walmar, and in now what is considered Latvia. So, one day, in 1845, while Seiji was writing on the blackboard, her exact double appeared beside her. The doppelganger precisely copied the teacher's exact moves as she wrote, except that it didn't hold any chalk. 13 students in the classroom witnessed the event. During the next year, Seiji's doppelganger was seen several times. The most astonishing instant of this took place in full view in front of an entire school body of 42 students on a summer day in 1846. As they sat at the long tables working, they could see Seiji in the school's garden gathering flowers. When the teacher left the room to talk to the headmistress, Seiji's doppelganger appeared in her chair, while the real Seiji could still be seen in the garden. 2 girls approached the phantom and tried to touch it, but felt like an odd resistance in the air surrounding it, and then the image of her slowly vanished.
Oh.
So that's considered to be one of the first documented stories from the 19th century of a doppelganger. And And yeah, so and that situation they called it a doppelganger, but by the definition I told you about before, it actually would be considered more to be bilocation, because everybody could see and interact with it, and it appeared to be almost like a psychic manifestation rather than an actual person.
Well, that's fucking weird.
Isn't it? So that was her story. The second story that I'm going to share with you is from Guy de Maupassant. So, the French novelist Guy de Maupassant was inspired to write a short story that he called Louis with a question mark, but it translates just to he question mark. That was inspired after a disturbing doppelganger experience that he had in 1889. While writing, de Maupassant claimed that his body double entered his study, sat beside him, and began dictating the story that he was in the process of writing. So, in Louis, the narrative is told by a young man who is convinced that he's going crazy after having glimpsed what appears to be his body double. For de Maupassant, who claimed to have numerous encounters with the doppelganger, the story proved to be somewhat prophetic. At the end of his life, de Maupassant was committed to a mental institution following a suicide attempt in 1892. The following year, he died, and it has been suggested that de Maupassant's visions of a body double may have actually been linked to mental illness caused by syphilis, which he contracted when he was a young man. So, in this one, too, they consider it to be more of like a bilocation or bilocation type thing, because it was more centered around his own thought process, and it could have also been an indicator of mental illness. But he basically in his book really described what it was like experiencing with this body double, to the point where he was like, yeah, no, this is like a real life event that I lived with. And yeah, which they then determined was maybe a cause of syphilis, which maybe, I don't know.
I don't know about that, but I mean, I don't know that much about syphilis, but I just have a feeling it might be something else. They should maybe recheck the diagnosis on that one.
That was kind of my thought too. For me, when I was reading up on his story, it was more like, I got more so the impression that he may have just not been diagnosed with a certain mental illness. As to what mental illness, I'm not entirely sure, but it seems like he kind of like experienced hallucinations of a sorts, like pretty chronically through his life, but his most vivid one was seeing himself outside of his own body.
I mean, that would be scary.
That'd be terrifying. Me? Like, I see me and I have to live in me every day. The last thing I need to do is see me outside of me. That's a lot. No, thank you.
It's too much.
It's too much. So then next I have John Donne. So, a 16th century English poet whose work often touched on the metaphysical, Donne claimed to have been visited by his wife's doppelganger while he was in Paris. She appeared to him holding a newborn baby. Donne's wife was pregnant at the time, but the apparition was a portent of great sadness, because at the same moment that the doppelganger appeared, his wife had given birth to a stillborn child. So, the story first appeared in a biography of Donne that was published in 1675, more than 40 years after Donne had died. And the English writer Isaac Walton, a friend of Donne's, also related a similar tale about the poet's experience. However, scholars have questioned the authenticity of both accounts, as they differ on a couple of really crucial details. But as far as like what he penned about his own experience, that was kind of what he had seen, was his wife's doppelganger, or a body double of his wife, carrying their child, and he then shortly learned about his own wife giving birth to their stillborn child, which is definitely coincidental, if anything else.
I feel like it also could be like a trauma response thing, you know?
Altering memories. I know, I kind of was curious about that one too, but yeah, so that was his iteration, at least, of his experience with a potential doppelganger. Then we have a story from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. So, this case suggests that doppelgangers might have something more to do with time or dimensional shifts. So, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, a 18th century German poet, wrote of confronting his doppelganger in his autobiography Dichtung und Wahrheit, which is called Poetry and Truth. In this account, Goethe describes traveling to the city of Drusenheim to visit Friedrich Brion, Friedrich, maybe? Brion, a young woman with whom he was having an affair. So, emotional and lost in thought, Goethe looked up to see a man dressed in a gray suit and trimmed in gold, who appeared briefly and then vanished. 8 years later, Goethe was again traveling on the same road, again to visit Friedrich, and he realized he was wearing a very gray suit, trimmed in gold, that he had seen his double wearing 8 years earlier. And the memory, Goethe wrote later, comforted him and his young love, and as they parted at the end of that visit. So, in his case, he believed that his doppelganger was not a, like, current manifestation of himself, but rather a, like, lapse in time, like, with the idea that time is somehow, like, all happening all at once, all the time, and that he'd just seen himself and not recognized that it was himself and thought it was somebody who looked like him.
I mean, that's an interesting theory.
Right? So, definitely an interesting take on it, and,
or maybe he saw someone wearing that suit and then subconsciously was like, that was a cool suit, I'm gonna get one.
That sounds like something I would do. like seeing somebody wearing something and being like, man, that's pretty cool. I think I'd like to own that for myself. And then just completely forgetting about it. And then one day he's like, man, what I'm wearing kind of looks like what that other guy was wearing. What are the chances of that?
I bet he was my clone. He's trying to steal my identity. Call
Obviously.
this FBI.
Call the FBI. Could not be anything else.
No other explanation.
Right? I know. It's funny that you said that because that was my thought too. Is just like, what are the chances that he saw it on somebody else and was like, man, like what a dapper looking dude. And then just years later, he happened to like buy the same thing for himself because he really liked it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would do the exact same thing, so I don't fault the dude. But I'm just saying, like, doppelganger might be a bit of a stretch. I don't know.
I do think the take, though, on, like, thinking it was himself, but, like, from the future, because he was, like, walking the same road, that's kind of an interesting take, too.
For sure. And, I mean, that would be kind of cool. Me in a parallel universe. Me in the future.
I would prefer seeing myself from the future than something pretending to be me. Like, if I had a choice.
Same. 100%.
Right? Just saying. But, so that's his take. And then I do have one other story. And so this one is from Sister Mary of Jesus. And, in this one, it's one of the most astonishing cases of bilocation. And it took place in 1622 at the Isolita mission and in what is now known as New Mexico. So, Father Alonso de Benavides reported encountering Germano Indians who, although they had never before met Spaniards, carried crosses and observed Roman Catholic rituals and knew Catholic liturgy in their native tongue. The Indians told him, also by the way, this is just, I've taken all of my verbiage directly from the source, so this is not my own penmanship, just in case anybody was curious. This is how he told it. So, from what he said, the Indians told him that they'd been instructed in Christianity by a lady in blue who came along to them for many years and taught them this new religion in their language. And when he returned to Spain, Father Benavides' investigation led him to Sister Mary of Jesus in Agreda, Spain, who claimed to have converted North American Indians not in body, but in spirit. So this lady was back in Spain. This man, New Mexico. Okay? So, Sister Mary said then that she regularly fell into a cataleptic trance, after which she recalled dreams, in which she was carried to a strange and wild land where she taught the gospel. As proof of her claim, she was able to provide highly detailed descriptions of the Germano Indians, including their appearance, clothing, and customs, none of which she could have learned through research since they had only been recently discovered by the Europeans at that time. And how did she learn their language? She said that she didn't, and that she just simply spoke to them and God let them understand one another. So, in this case, basically this priest, from meeting them and seeing that they already were practicing Catholicism, found a lady who had basically claimed that she had taught them, but she had no idea who they were. And that was through a form of, like, her projecting herself physically to another place in her dreams.
Like on the astral plane.
On the astral plane. You got that right. We always find our way back here. But yeah, no, and I also thought that was a really interesting take because it also kind of ties in astral projection, which we've also talked about previously, so.
Yeah, these stories that you're telling me, like, they give me the same vibes as, like, the astral plane stuff.
Totally. Well, and that's why, like, for, like, an extension of this episode, I really wanted to find modern day people's reiterations of doppelgangers that they've seen, or, like, situations of bilocation, because these ones are just the most popular ones from history that are kind of, like, considered noteworthy ones when talking about it. But as far as, like, actual experiences, like, there's been lots of people, like, either through Reddit or other online forums who have shared their own experiences, and, like, there's some really spooky ones out there.
I mean, you'll have to just do another episode on it so we can hear all the spooky stories.
Well, that is my plan.
My real question for you, Emily, is have you ever seen a doppelganger of yourself?
Not really. Like I said,
or
the closest thing I've... See, that's the thing, is I've had other people tell me that they've seen somebody who looks like me, who's not really me, in the town that we grew up in. But I myself have not seen another person that I think looks like me, other than, like I told you, the situation where I dyed my hair and then walked past a mirror and then scared myself. So that would really be it. But I have heard other people say that they've seen somebody who they think is me and it's not actually me. But I did have somebody who was friends with this person show me, like, a picture of what they look like. And it's somebody who just has, the same, like, face shape that I do. And it looks like the same, like, very similar eyebrows and, like nose, lips. Like, the face measurements line up, but, like, if you look at them, you can tell it's not me.
Right. Yeah. The only people who I've met who I'm like, oh my god, they look so similar, it's kind of spooky, is my partner's best friend and your friend's partner.
They are very weirdly looking. The only difference that I can even still catch between the two of them, like, if I'm really looking, is one of them is just taller than the other one. Like, they have a slightly different build, but they look so alike. But I'm pretty sure it's because they are both Dutch. That is what I'm putting it on. I'm pretty sure that's why.
It's the Dutch curly hair look.
It has to be. Blonde, Dutch, curly hair, being very tall and thin. And that's it.
That's all it takes, folks. And you got yourself a doppelganger.
It's true. But yeah, since I was kind of hoping to elaborate more in depth on another episode, that kind of brings me to the end of today's episode. If you guys liked the show, you can visit us on our website, which is www.wheelofcrime.com. You can also send us an email and tell us your own story if you have met a doppelganger or have experienced bilocation, since both of them are body double situations. That could be really cool. And that is wheelofcrime@gmail.com. Besides that, you can leave us a review on wherever you listen to our podcast and help us with finding new listeners. That could be greatly appreciated. We also have a Patreon if you'd like to donate to the show, which is @Wheel of Crime on Patreon. And besides that, we also have social media, which is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok @Wheel of Crime, if you would like to check us out there for show updates. And that is about it. That's all I got.
Alright, and that brings us to the end of another episode. So with that, we will see you all next week with another new episode. Okay, bye.
Bye.